So I'm going to talk to you guys about the Yi ethnic minority, and they reside in southwest China, which is in the province of Yunnan within China. So that's about as south as you can relatively get without getting towards like Tibet or moving into India and stuff. Um, so the Yi are an ethnic minority of China, which means they are like recognized by the dominant culture, the Han, and there's about 55 or 56 other ethnic minorities. And the Yi are a very large group. They're the seventh largest group out of all of the ethnic minorities. And there's roughly about 7 to 8 million people within the Yi ethnic minority itself, and they inhabit a very large amount of the Yunnan province, and they even live quite high up north into Sichuan. Um, there isn't very much like actual evidence that's been collected from the Yi people as of recently. There's been like a lot more that's been put together. Um, the leading scholar is a guy named Stephen Harrell. Stephen Harrell is like an ethnographer, and he worked with a lot of different scholars that are Yi, that are Han, and from any other like ethnic group to try and compile like as much knowledge as they could about this minority. Um, One of the big things that they had run into was that the Yi minority did not have like a solidified language. It's very locationally based, so anything that they had done in the north, their dialect may not necessarily be the same as a dialect for somebody in the south per se, or somebody in the west, or somebody in the east. They have maybe some certain words that would be familiar, but the Yi tend to pick up a lot of like their dialect from other cultures around them. They're surrounded by the Bai people, the Hui people, the Miao people, and the Mosu people. They are also recognized as ethnic minorities by the Han. So being surrounded by all those different cultures, the Yi are kind of in between in a way. They got one foot in their culture and another foot in everybody else's culture, really. They tend to be like xenophobic at first, but if they pick up a tradition or something like that, they tend to embrace it quite wholeheartedly. Um, One of the really interesting things about the Yi people is they are actually still regarded as like a slave society. I'm not sure how current that still is, but they still tend to keep slaves and serfs, and they have a caste system where like everything is judged by the hardness of your bones, and that determines your class, and you can be punished and sentenced to death for like marrying outside of your class, which I think is really interesting that this is still something that is practiced even today and willingly practiced among some of these people. Um, so one of the other really important things that the Yi people are about is like their religion. And so in their religion, they have a priest, and the priest is known as the Bimo. The Bimo is like the keeper of knowledge for the Yi people. So they tend to like keep the genealogy trails of certain families. Certain families can be higher ranking than others because they can keep their genealogy for like a certain number of generations or such, and that tends to give them like higher ranking status because they're closer in touch with their ancestors by having all of these recordings. So the Bimo is actually, until recently, one of the only literate groups of the Yi minority, and I find that pretty amazing within itself, especially due to the fact that like they didn't have like a unified language. So anybody that would have been literate had to be pretty smart. Um, But for like my end product of what I put together about the Yi people, I kind of put together like a small travel guide of places to go if you were going to try and see the Yi people, and like festivals to see. So if you were to really try to go and find the Yi people, what you would want to do is you would want to try and take a plane from anywhere you can to get to Shanghai in China and get to Beijing, Shanghai, one of those two places, and then try and take another plane from there to the city of Kunming, which is kind of like the hub airport, you could say, of Yunnan province. And there you'll find like a lot of different ethnic minorities and just a whole bunch of different people. But if you wanted to really try and find the Yi people specifically, once you go from Kunming, you can try and travel a little bit more north and head toward the Liangshan Autonomous Prefecture, and that is an autonomous region specifically for the Yi ethnic minority. Um, and there you can also find a place to go called the Stone Forest Scenic Spot. Um, Stephen Harrell outlines that there's a torch festival that takes place during the 26th and 27th days of the 6th month of the lunar calendar. So if I'm not mistaken, that's somewhere around October. And if you were to go there around that time of year, you might be able to catch the Yi people all carrying a bunch of torches to celebrate like having a great harvest and burning away the insects to celebrate having like a great harvest and reaping in everything they can possibly have. Um, I think that it's really interesting all the different like traditions the Yi people have and how they manage to still contain themselves, even though there's like the Han culture has begun moving deeper and deeper into the border edges of the Yunnan province and begun building lots of buildings there. And this is one of the things that they have to battle as being an ethnic minority, is that they're being infringed upon by like a dominant population. And that's just one thing to keep in mind about all of these ethnic minorities. And even though there may be 56 and we may think of them as small, there's 7 million people that belong just to that group alone, which is a staggering population. So that's really important to think about when you're talking about percentages and stuff when it comes to populations in China, is that the population in China is so great that comparatively to the United States, it may seem minimal if we're talking in percentages, but if you talk in literal numbers, it's much more apparent the like vastness of the population of China and their ethnic minorities. So I just wanted to outline that and share this information with you all. So thanks.